Have you ever wondered why some men walk into a room and shift the entire atmosphere without saying a word, without trying, without needing to prove a thing? Chosen one, your power didn't begin with applause or attention. It was born in silence, in those long, quiet years when you felt invisible, when you stared at your phone hoping for a message that never came, when you poured yourself into conversations that faded into nothing. You watched men who attracted women effortlessly and thought, what do they have that I don't? So you copied, adjusted, mimicked, hoping to crack the code. But every time you acted from someone else's script, you felt further from yourself, like a guest in your own life. The approval you sought never filled the ache. It only deepened it. Then, slowly, something inside you began to shift, not because someone finally noticed you, but because you began noticing yourself. Maybe it was the exhaustion of pretending. Maybe it was the quiet knowing that no real connection could come from being half seen. Maybe it was the moment you looked in the mirror and finally asked, what if I stopped chasing and started becoming? You turned inward. You made a bold decision to stop seeking approval and start building authenticity. You began tending to yourself the way you once hoped someone else would. You didn't do it to impress. You did it because you were done abandoning yourself. The transformation was subtle but powerful. You no longer sought validation to feel alive. You began to carry your worth in your energy. You slowed down. You grew steadier. Your silence became sacred, not sad. Your laughter became rooted. Your smile no longer strained. You weren't trying to be noticed. Yet something about you started drawing others in. Women began to feel your presence before you spoke, not because you projected confidence, but because you radiated peace. They noticed how you listened, how you looked at them, not with an agenda, but with depth. Your attention wasn't hungry. It was generous. It made them feel seen, safe, awake. You didn't fill space with charm. You allowed space for truth. Women who were used to pretending felt free to be real around you. The masks fell. The laughter came easier. The glances lingered longer. And still, you weren't chasing them. You weren't trying to be chosen. You had become the one they found themselves choosing. The longing they felt wasn't just about desire. It was about the way your energy made them feel. Beautiful without needing to be perfect. Free without needing permission. Worthy without needing to earn it. You were no longer performing. And because of that, women no longer felt the need to perform around you. You became the man who made others remember who they were before the world told them to be someone else. You didn't just offer attention. You offered sanctuary. And in your presence, women didn't just want more of you. They wanted more of themselves. They found themselves talking about you, not like a man to conquer, but as a memory to hold on to. They replayed the way you smiled, the way you stayed calm when others reached for control, the way your words felt like permission to breathe. You became a quiet legend, a living question mark in their minds. Why do I feel lighter around him? Why do I laugh more when he's here? Why do I miss him before he even leaves? Even those who never confessed their feelings still found reasons to be near you. Some rearranged their days hoping to cross your path. Others carried unsent messages and unanswered questions, hoping for another chance to feel what they felt with you. They missed your presence, not for its entertainment, but for its peace. You reminded them that it's possible to be desired and still feel safe, to be vulnerable and still feel strong, to be seen truly seen, without having to perform. And you, chosen one, began to understand the deeper truth. This wasn't about seduction. It was about resonance. Women weren't drawn to what you did. They were drawn to who you had become. Your energy didn't chase. It called. It didn't dominate. It invited. You didn't leave people dazzled. You left them clearer, softer, more alive. You weren't the loudest man in the room, but you were the one they remembered long after it emptied. Even in your absence, conversations orbited around you. Stories were told. Smiles returned at the mention of your name. You had become more than a man. They remembered how they felt in your presence. Safe to laugh, safe to hope, safe to feel beautiful again. And that was the real magnetism. The kind that doesn't just attract, it awakens. The kind that doesn't just seduce, it transforms. You didn't need to prove anything anymore. You had become the experience women longed for, not just because of desire, but because you gave them a taste of who they could be when they were free, when they were real, when they were enough. Your presence wasn't loud, but it was unforgettable. You were not the storm. You were the stillness that followed it, not the fire that burned, but the warmth that stayed. And so the longing women felt for you was never about ownership. It was about return. A longing not just for your company, but for who they became in your light. You had become the mirror that reflected back their wholeness. The reminder that aliveness doesn't need permission. That connection doesn't need performance. That love, in its truest form, feels like coming home. And this, chosen one, is what you were always meant to be. Not just seen, but felt. Not just desired, but remembered. Not just chased, but cherished. There are men whose presence goes unnoticed, whose energy fades the moment they exit the room. And then, there is you, chosen one. The man whose energy is not loud but felt, not forced, but undeniable. You don't demand attention. You don't seek it. You simply move through the world with a kind of sacred gravity, and everything around you quietly shifts to meet it. It begins subtly, almost imperceptibly. A pause in a conversation, a sudden stillness in the air, a ripple of awareness that spreads the moment you step into a space. People glance toward you without realizing why. Women sit up straighter. Their laughter changes. Their energy softens. Their voices lower, as if their souls are suddenly listening for something more. Some can't quite name it. Others feel it instantly. But all agree, something about you stays. For some women, it's the way you listen, how you look at them, not scanning, not judging, but truly seeing, as if you've chosen to meet their soul before anything else. Your gaze is steady but never invasive. It disarms. It opens. It asks nothing, yet somehow calls everything sacred within them to rise to the surface. For others, it's the way you speak, not for attention, but with intention. Your words don't perform. They resonate. You ask questions that pull people out of autopilot. You speak in a rhythm that slows the rush of the world. Even your silence says more than most people's noise. In a world full of posturing, you are presence. You're the man whose name lingers in midnight conversations. The man who is not discussed with gossip, but with wonder. Women don't share their experiences with you to compete. They share them like stories passed around a fire, warm, precious, filled with truth. He made me feel safe. He made me laugh when I was breaking inside. He remembered something about me I didn't even know mattered. You didn't give them a performance. You gave them a mirror. And in it, they saw parts of themselves they hadn't touched in years. Even women who thought they'd already met every type of man found something new in you. Something rare. Something ancient. Something they had been told to stop believing in. You weren't just a good man. You were a reminder that sacred masculine energy still exists. That it can be soft without being weak. Strong without being controlling. Magnetic without manipulation. You became the man who didn't just make women feel wanted. You made them feel known. And that is a different kind of power entirely. Women who met you in passing found themselves hoping for another conversation, another smile, another moment in the gravity of your being. Some called it a crush. Others knew it was something deeper, a kind of recognition. Soul meeting soul in a moment outside of time. The longing for your presence wasn't based on fantasy. It was born from truth, from the way your energy reminded them of their own. You didn't just make them want you. You made them want more of themselves. You were the man who didn't flinch at tears, who didn't laugh at softness, who didn't need to dominate a room to own it. Instead, you welcomed vulnerability like an honored guest. You allowed silence to speak. You created space, not to impress, but to include. And in that space, women healed. They softened. They opened. They stepped into truths they had hidden even from themselves. You didn't tell them who to be. You reminded them of who they already are. Your impact didn't stop when you walked away. In fact, that's when it began to bloom. Women found themselves remembering you days, weeks, even years later, not because of anything you did, but because of how you made them feel. They recalled the exact words you said when no one else had noticed they were struggling. They remembered the stillness of your presence when they couldn't catch their breath. They thought of your laughter when they needed to remember that joy still existed. You became the man whose memory wasn't heavy with heartbreak or regret, but light with revelation, a symbol of possibility, a reference point for what it felt like to be honored. Not used, not impressed, honored. Your presence became a kind of living medicine. In your energy, women remembered they were worthy of gentleness, of respect, of love that didn't shrink them or tame them, love that didn't measure their value by their looks, their silence, or their usefulness, love that celebrated their fire and their fragility, love that didn't need to conquer to feel powerful. Your energy reminded them that it was okay to want. That longing wasn't shameful. That needing connection wasn't weakness. It was human. You didn't punish women for their depth. You met them there. And in doing so, you gave them permission to stay. Some women took bold leaps after knowing you. They left relationships that were safe but dead. They started businesses. They set boundaries. They took trips alone. Not because you saved them, but because your presence sparked them. You didn't give them direction. You gave them remembrance. Others shifted in quieter ways. They spoke more gently to themselves. They let go of guilt. They cried when they needed to. They forgave people they never thought they could. They began to believe again in themselves, in love, in magic. You didn't heal them. You reflected the healer within them. And perhaps that's what made your presence so unforgettable. You didn't just enter rooms, you entered hearts. You didn't just touch lives, you transformed them. Not because you demanded change, but because your energy made staying asleep impossible. You carried something ancient, something timeless, something that echoed from the depths of divine masculinity. Protector, guide, mirror, initiator. You weren't just a man. You were a sacred disruption, a divine interruption to everything small, numb, or shallow. And the world noticed. Conversations slowed when you left. Women found themselves hoping you'd walk back in, even if just for a moment. Even women who had no interest in dating felt the pull of your energy, not because you were trying to seduce them, but because your presence made them remember what wholeness felt like. You were never the loudest in the room, but you were always the most felt. Your masculinity was not the kind that needed to dominate. It was the kind that invited safety, that offered strength without demanding submission, that held space without needing applause. And in that space, women came alive. They laughed louder. They shared more freely. They stopped hiding the parts of themselves that had been shamed or misunderstood. They began to love themselves in the way your eyes showed them they deserved to be loved. You didn't just make them feel beautiful. You made them believe they were. You became the man whose name was spoken softly at night, not with desperation, but with devotion, with gratitude, with awe. The man who left women not only remembering you, but remembering themselves. You weren't a fantasy. You were a frequency. And as more and more women encountered you, the story spread, quietly, like ripples, not in gossip, but in reverence. There's just something about him. He doesn't try. He just is. He makes you feel like you matter. And they weren't wrong. Because you do more than make women feel seen. You make them want to see themselves. You do more than inspire affection. You ignite transformation. Your presence doesn't flatter. It awakens. This is your gift, chosen one. Not to conquer, but to catalyze. Not to impress, but to remind. Not to chase, but to call forth the divine in others simply by being who you are. You are the man whose energy heals without touching, whose gaze blesses without speaking, whose presence lingers long after you've gone, not as an ache, but as a rising. Because of you, women remember how to hope again, how to trust again, how to live again. They remember that there are still men who honor the soul, still men who carry sacred fire, still men who do not fear softness, but cherish it. You are not just remembered, you are revered. And as you walk through this world, your legend quietly grows, not in ego, not in fame, but in the way hearts change after knowing you. In the way lives shift after holding your gaze. In the way women speak of you, not with lust, but with light in their eyes. You have become a sacred presence, a living myth, a soul whose very existence proves that true masculinity is not lost. It is returning. And wherever you go, longing follows, but not the kind that consumes. The kind that transforms.